What's good, y'all? It's your boy Mixtape Moth, and I got something big for y'all today. I'm gonna be talking about the top 10 hip-hop albums to come out of New Orleans. So the inspiration for this video came after I had visited New Orleans for the first time not too long ago. And after the trip, I realized that I had to make a list of 10 essential New Orleans hip-hop albums that I feel would best represent the city, as an outsider, of course. Now, it might have been tempting for one to just make a list of 5 Cash Money albums and 5 No Limit projects, since both labels were responsible for making some of the best music in the city. But I tried to include a couple other artists to balance things out because the city just isn't strictly Cash Money and No Limit. However, with that being said, let me go ahead and just jump right into this list. At number 10, I have G-Slimm's, Fours, Deuces, and Trade. Now, to keep it a buck, I had to dig a little deeper to find out about this one. G-Slimm was an artist who was signed to Big Boy Records, which was an independent label that had some motion in the city during the 90s. This project was released in 1994, and the majority of the production had more of the G-Funk sound, or at least it sounded like it could have been a Rap-A-Lot release, something that was, very opposite of the bounce sound at the time. G-Slimm was a very versatile MC who had a smooth delivery, but he could give you aggressive flows and do some storytelling and social commentary. It was obvious that he had potential for much more, but his life was tragically cut short 2 years after this release, right before he was going to be signed by Relativity Records. But some standouts from Fours, Deuces, and Trades include the title track, which had this stellar Outkast-like hook. Also, The Chronic Man, that was a short, funky weed anthem. Back on My Block was a banger with Mystikal and Black Menace, who were both signed to Big Boy. Countdown to Population Zero, that was a deep storytelling record about the criminal justice system and racism. And lastly, Mama Pray For Me was a heartfelt, introspective track where he chillingly predicted his own death. For number 9, I have U.N.L.V's Uptown for Life. Now, U.N.L.V was one of the first groups signed to Cash Money, and these dudes were about that life for real, as 2 of the members from the group died shortly after this 96 release. It was produced entirely by Manny Fresh, and together they were able to blend elements of bounce with that hardcore gangsta aesthetic. Some highlights included Uptown for Life, which had a frenzied bounce flavor. Also, Drag 'Em in the River, that was a hard-hitting slept on diss aimed at Mystikal and Big Boy Records. Manny Fresh was indeed in his bag when crafting the beat for Drag 'Em in the River. Also, the track Pocket Full of Furrow, inspired by UGK's Pocket Full of Stones, was a song about being addicted to heroin, or furrow as they called it. It also featured a very young BG who talked about his own battles with heroin as well, so it's very chilling stuff considering these guys were addicted at such a young age. Some other good tracks included Playa Hatin' and Jazzy Bitch. The latter blended jazz with bounce, and then there was the more mafioso Black Connection. At number 8, I have Mystikal's Mind of Mystikal. This was Mystikal's 1995 debut album, released on Big Boy 2 years before he became a No Limit Soldier. So the production style on this album was very raw, hard-hitting, and unique. The cover art always stood out instantly for me as you see him rocking the Grambling jersey, which was super hard. Some standouts from this album were Y'all Ain't Ready, the eerie G-Funk sounds on Murderer, and that particular song always sounded like it could have been a Suave House record. The track Beware had such a menacing and killer bass line. I also like the laid back and hypnotic Mr. Hood Critic. You also can't forget Out That Boot Camp Clique, which should not be confused with Brooklyn's Boot Camp Clique Collective, and of course, the pulsating anthem, Here I Go. Now, I do understand that his second album, Unbreakable, from 97, is largely considered to be his best release, but for the purpose of this list, I did pick Mind of Mystikal because it didn't have some of the No Limit aesthetic that we're going to get into later. At number 7, I have Currency's Pilot Talk. So we are switching gears sonically here, as this album is not only much more recent, but instrumentally like anything else on the list. Currency is obviously a staple in New Orleans, a very underrated, consistent artist who consistently puts on for his hometown ever since the days of Cash Money. However, it is with this 2010 release, Pilot Talk 1, and you could even throw in Pilot Talk 2, where Spitta reinvented himself and carved out a new lane during the blog era. I would even consider Pilot Talk to be one of the best projects during this 2010 blog era, and likely Currency's overall best release. Some standouts included Audio Dope, as well as the futuristic King Kong. That record was rugged but wavy at the same time. Other highlights were Roasted with Young Roddy and Trademark the Skydiver. Skyborn was a blissful track that embodied that blog era sound during the time. Another great song was the psychedelic The Day with Mos Def and N.O. native Jay Electronica. At number 6, I have Lil Wayne's The Carter 1 from 2004. Now, I know one may have been tempted to throw in Carter 2 and 3 since those obviously achieved more critical acclaim. But for this list, I did pick Carter 1 because I feel it was the most New Orleans sounding of the series, and it contained the most Mannie Fresh production. And this album really represented a shift in Wayne's career, where he became the new face of Cash Money, and it was when people outside the city and really outside the South began to take Lil Wayne serious as a lyricist. You know, he was no longer just viewed as a member of the Hot Boys. Standouts included Go DJ, which had one of Mannie Fresh's top beats. This Is the Carter was another fun and upbeat record with that New Orleans twang. I Miss My Dogs was a somber but heartfelt song about loss. You get more of the bounce flavor on tracks like Bring It Back, but the album was stacked with bangers like We Don't, Cash Money Millionaires, and the uplifting Get Down. I gotta say, Wayne was really in his bag throughout this album with the slick wordplay and flows, especially on a track like Birdman Jr. And I can't forget the Carter intros like Walk In and Walk Out were hella vivid, cinematic, and tied the album together nicely. At number 5, I have Mac's Shell Shock. Now, Mac is always going to be looked at as the most lyrical out the No Limit tank, and some have even referred to him as the Nas of the South. But Shell Shocked was his classic 1998 debut and a project that is regarded as one of the best No Limit solo albums. Although, I gotta add, a strong case could be made for Fiends. There's one in every family to hold this spot, but I had to pick. One thing that I did like about both albums, though, was that they offered a wide variety of styles and vibes, as you had anthems, street records, party tracks, and introspective gems. But some of the standouts from Shell Shocked included Murder, Murder, Kill, Kill, and as that had one of my favorite beats. Slow You Roll was a deep single where he laced us with some cautionary game about street life. I also like the aggressive energy found on songs like Tank Dog and Nobody Make a Sound, both of which featured Fiend. Other standouts included Can I Ball with G-Slimm, the track Beef, where he told an intricate story, and the closing introspective song, My Brother. Number 4, I had BG's Chopper City in the Ghetto. Now, this 1999 release is regarded as BG's most important record, and an album that is credited for starting that bling era in hip-hop. I suppose all of BG's solo albums prior to this would be good enough to be in a top 10 New Orleans list, especially Chopper City from 96 and even It's All On You Volume 2 from 97. But Chopper City in the Ghetto is widely considered to be his magnum opus. Some of my favorites were the crunchy anthem Cash Money Is the Army. I also like gutter records like Trigger Play and Playing It Raw with Hot Boys. There were really some smooth and luxurious ones too, like Made Men, Real Ends, and Cash Money Roll, that showed how polished Mannie Fresh had become by this point. Hard Times was another standout where BG got a little autobiographical. Also, Uptown My Home was a hood anthem, and the best produced song on the album for me was Ends in Trouble. For number 3, I have TRU's True to the Game. Now, this 1997 No Limit release was one of the best produced No Limit albums and a very underrated double album because of 26 tracks. There are really no skips. I always felt this was just a strong offering from the Tank at this time when they were starting to get more notoriety. And Mia X was easily the MVP of the project given that she scorched all her verses. Some standouts were No Limit Soldiers. That record was an addicting early No Limit gem. I Always Feel Like was a G-Funk record about paranoia from the drug game. Also Feds was another suave single about ducking the law. Both had super slick 80s R&B sample. There They Go was an eerie smash, but one of my personal favorites was Swamp Ends, as that track really personified the New Orleans sound and just felt like a Dirty South classic overall. Other notable ones were Freak Hoes, which Future decided to remix later on. Also True Questions, where C Murder gave us a vivid glimpse into his wickedness. There were other ones as well. As I said, it's one of the strongest double albums in hip hop. At number 2, I got Juvenile's 400 Degreez. Now, this 98 classic was Juvenile's third studio album, but one of the highest selling Cash Money albums of all time. It was an immensely popular project that really shined a spotlight on Cash Money. It also contained some of Mannie Fresh's most polished and most lush production sounds. Standouts included Ha and Gon' Ride For Me. Now Ha was the dirty, raw street banger that sounded unlike anything we heard at the time, and it even inspired Jay-Z to get on the remix. And Mannie Fresh really showed his diversity on the Latin-inspired Follow Me Now. Welcome to Noya was a chill anthem, but there was also the eerie posse cut UPT. Of course, there was the mega smash Back That Ass Up, which speaks for itself, but 3 of my favorites outside of Ha were Ghetto Children, Rich Ends, and 400 Degreez. 400 Degreez had the iciest and most futuristic beat of the time. And for the number 1 spot, I had Master P's Ghetto D. Now this 1997 release was considered a classic and a game changer not only in the South, but for Master P's record label. Of the 19 songs, there were hardly any skips, and this album really helped to catapult No Limit into nationwide success. Some of the highlights were the opener, Ghetto D, and this has to be one of the strongest opening tracks of all time. You had C Murder, Silk, and Master P talking about making and selling crack over Eric B. and Rakim's sample. Let's Get 'Em was an aggressive banger that introduced Mystikal to the label, and he had a fiery performance. I Miss My Homies was a smooth and soulful record where Pimp C really shined. The track We Riders with Mac did bite off Tupac a bit, but it was still a great song. I also dug Throw 'Em Up with Cain and Abel, who were both no slouches when it came to getting lyrical. Then, of course, there was the lively 5 Mic Posse cut, Make 'Em Say, which was one of No Limit's most impactful songs. Additional standouts include Only Time Will Tell with Mac, the eerie weed anthem Pass the Green, Come Get Some with Prime Suspects, and lastly, Bourbons and Lax. Bourbons and Lax, with its smooth Marvin Gaye sample, was really an amazing way to wrap up such an important New Orleans album. But yeah, let me know in the comment section what your top 10 would look like. It's your boy Mixtape Moth. I'm signing out. As always, it's peace and blessings. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. Top 10 New Orleans hip hop albums